started out in my career as a highway engineer, highway design construction engineer. Decided that I would do that at the age of, 12, 13, 7th grade. My stepdad is a civil engineering professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison, so that might have had something to do with it. He did remote sensing and image interpretation, so he started in the 50s doing this, and now we have great things like LiDAR for being able to see if there are going to be slides in the future, and all of this amazing stuff, and it was very exciting. And most of our trips, this is why I'm telling you this, were out from Wisconsin, out to the West Coast, out to Washington and Oregon, because all of the images that his students were looking at were from space or from airplane, and they're from the Midwest. And geologically, geographically, all of cool stuff is out here. So he would come and take 3D pictures on the ground so he could show his students, this is what a lava flow looks like. This is what a volcano looks like, right? These are the different types of structures you see on the ground, and now how do you interpret that from the air, and how do you create those USGS maps that they create with the topo, right? And identify those things. That's how I ended up out in this neck of the woods. And going to school at Portland State University for 2 master's degrees, one in urban and regional planning, and the other in another master's in civil, where I had wanted to get a PhD in roundabouts. Don't start. I love roundabouts, so we can debate that all night if you want. But and did anybody see the Mythbusters that's going around?
Yes.
Awesome. Prove the fact. So,
I believe it's up in our Facebook group already.
Yes. Mythbusters did an episode on whether a 4-way stop is more efficient than a roundabout, a single-lane roundabout, and they found that the roundabout put more cars through than the 4-way stop. And I can go into all of the reasons and rationale why, but I guess the history that you should know is I started as chair, getting organized in my neighborhood association, got a traffic circle that everybody had wanted, designed, and financed through a grant and constructed, and everybody thought that was the greatest thing on earth, and suddenly I was running for city council. So from city council, working on a bunch of very fun projects, including trying to get streetcar to the city. It would have been the first Portland to outside of Portland streetcar to downtown Lake Oswego, which hasn't happened, but someday in the future it will.
My father also succeeded. He lives in Lake Oswego.
Who?
My father.
Oh, good. He heard all about it. But more successfully getting light rail extended out from downtown Portland into Clackamas County for 2 lines while I was on the county commission. So I'm very multimodal, everything from highway design and construction to transit construction and operations, where I spent time at TriMet. I'm trying to give you a quick overview, but there's just so much fun stuff to talk about. So really, I don't see the world as one mode or the other. I see land uses that need to be served. Because if we forget about land uses and we forget about people and we forget about moving goods and the services that are provided, then we've lost sight of why we're doing the job that we're doing. There's a lot of opportunities that get missed if we don't actually talk about the context of what we're trying to build in. Because really that's what we do, is when we make an investment in transportation, you're doing a lot of construction and you're doing a lot of operations and maintenance. So if we don't understand that context, then that's where we can get sideways with communities and with actually achieving the outcomes that we thought we were trying to achieve. So while we will always have highways and we will always be moving people long distance and trying to move them fast, and there will always be some sort of car, whether it's small and electric or whether it's large and a suburban, we will have different cars and we will have different types of markets, as I like to say. Some people are, as we move through life, we have different needs, right? There's even a lot of research now about women and their travel is very different than men. You're going to tell me, duh, but we actually don't talk about that in transportation that much. and what the needs are of moving people around differently and allowing them for those choices. And so we're trying to talk about that at WSDOT and include that in not only our planning but in the development of our projects. So let me talk a little bit about our strategic plan quickly, and then we can get to some of your questions. I don't know if you know this, but this is the strategic plan. I didn't want a 150-page document that sat on a shelf with everything in apple pie, right? We are trying to balance a bunch of stuff going on at Washington Department of Transportation. One, we want to help get out of the recession and create economic development and improve jobs. And the only way we can do that is by working with communities. So you'll see strategic investments at the top because we are going to have a reduction in our maintenance and preservation budget of 52% over the next 4 years. And that's already on a significantly reduced amount of money. So 8 out of your 39.5 cents of your gas tax actually go to preservation and maintenance. The rest of it is all bonded. So the credit card is maxed out, and we're paying for a lot of debt for a long time. And so all of us, cities, counties, the state, are doing preservation and maintenance on that 8 cents. And so as we have issues with ferry funding, money has been moved from the highways into the ferries for operations and maintenance. So that's part of the reduction, along with the fact that the amount of money that used to come from a penny gas tax is slowly decreasing because people are driving less, they're taking other modes, they're not taking as many trips, and cars are more fuel efficient. So it's no longer a user fee. So we're seeing a drastic reduction of a right sizing of the organization in order to accomplish this. But in order to make sure that we're continuing to move goods and services and people, we're looking at how to do modal integration. And what we mean by that is that we need to make sure that we're connecting modes so that things can move quickly and easily between, whether that's ferries to bikes, or ferries to buses, or ferries to pedestrians, right? We need to make sure that those gaps are strategically filled so that the entire system works. Obviously, environmental stewardship from a sustainability point of view, making sure that we have cost-effective, low-cost types of investments. Organizational strength. We have had no training for many years at WSDOT on any new innovation, any new thinking. We just haven't been training our people, and with 70% of our workforce over the age of 45, things have changed since they went through school. Things have changed in the world, right? So we're trying to make sure that we provide that foundational base of what's out there and what are the opportunities that we need to take advantage of. Community engagement, we've significantly beefed up how we do community engagement. We'll continue to do that. One of the ways that's very public right now is the ferry director hiring process. Not only did we strengthen up the committee that did the first round of interviews, which included 2 ferry advocates, a city rep, a county rep from the Puget Sound area that's served by the ferries, but we also had 2 union reps as well as some WSDOT employees. So the WSDOT employees were actually completely outweighed by the external stakeholders who are our customers. And they forwarded us our 3 names, and 1 person backed out, but we have 2 people that are at a meet and greet up at Bremerton right now for the community. And that's the second one. We had one the day before as well. So trying to beef up that advanced community engagement, not the end engagement where you're like, but it looks done and we don't like it. So now what? So, how do we get stakeholder and just interested folk expertise in at the beginning, along the process, and then at the end? And then how do we make sure that those folks that have the hardest time being part of the process still have an opportunity to get engaged? And that's probably something that's very close to my heart in terms of making sure that as a planner, on my planning hat side of the equation, you have to represent everybody who's in the room and everybody who's not in the room. And that's how I also look at being an elected official. You can't just be about who's in the room. You have to be about the entire community and go out and find out who didn't make it, why they didn't make it, and what they need, what you need to think about in terms of being able to serve them. The last one is smart technology. If we're not going to have the money to be building, I won't say more Alaska Way viaducts, but projects, but large projects, that's obviously not on the agenda right now. We still need to find ways to efficiently move people. So how much can we do by giving you more information, by getting more data to more third-party providers that provide apps? And I'll give you an example of that. And how do we include more technology into our own operations, like that rolling speed signs that you may think, oh my God, what kind of nightmare did you put in front of us? But what that has done is, while it hasn't necessarily had huge impacts on how many cars we can get through straight up, it has reduced the number of collisions by 17%, which actually does reduce delay, on the back end. But it also just reduces the headache of having it, for anybody out there who has a fender bender, right? So they've had an unintended good consequence, which is great. Just more of a heads up, like you're coming up, don't slam on the brakes. So there's a lot of stuff that we'd like to start demoing, and maybe even be one of the states that looks at how to get the automated vehicles out there faster. I think that opens up a lot of things for us by maximizing our existing capacity in our roadways. How many of you remember in driving school that you were supposed to stay a distance behind the car? And what was it?
1 car per 10 miles per hour. That's
One car length.
4 seconds.
4 seconds.
He's closest to it, and he's right. It's 2 seconds, and it's 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. That's, from the Midwest.
I thought it was 4 on the highway though, right?
No, it's actually, no, it's 2.
I'm from the Midwest too.
Yeah, you drive fast.
Yeah.
So it's all based on your perception reaction time, right? So the older you are, the more space you should leave. But it's 2.5 seconds is a normal, perception reaction time to perceive that somebody is braking, and then to apply your brakes and be able to stop at high speeds. So if you are not in the equation as a human being with 2.5 seconds perception reaction time, you can narrow the gap between cars. If you narrow the gap between cars, you can fit more cars, and it's safer. It's safer with the automated cars because they are going to react faster. Now, I'm sure that, there'll be a lot of testing of this technology before it gets out there, but I'd like us to consider as a state being on the forefront of testing some of this stuff. And I don't know if any of you, I've also on Facebook seen the thing that's going around on solar freaking highways.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right?
I know. My eyes were like, so this couple in Montana or Wyoming, Idaho, they were given a grant from FHWA, Federal Highways Administration, to look at how to put solar panels beneath a glass or acrylic surface. And they're looking to demo it right now in parking lots, because obviously, getting it to the highway side under all the truckloads and everything that it would have to take is still years away, but all of that surface area could be taken up with some sort of panels. But what was more intriguing to me is that they had LED lights built into them, so that at a moment's notice you could change the lane structure. If you had an accident, if you were to think ahead, you could put it on like a Coleman dock, right? And you could change the lane structure depending on the capacity that you needed, or if there was more pedestrians or more bikes, or there was a bus that was out. I mean, it's just the endless opportunities. So that's what keeps me going every day. The hard stuff we'll be talking about. But the biggest thing that I guess I would let you know is I have 10 reforms that go along with these strategic goals that we have. Those 10 reforms came out of a mega projects assessment. How do we not make the mistakes of the past? And also out of things that were just generally needed some more attention. The tolling program is a new line of business for WSDOT, and it needs constant attention and auditing to make sure that we're doing the best practices. So if you go online, you'll see the 10 reforms under the Secretary's name, me. And the other one is minority contracting, making sure that we're getting out as much work as we possibly can to minority contractors, not only because it's the law, but because it's the right thing to do, because they still feel discrimination within the process. And we can go into why that is, but it's just the way the world works. But we're trying to make sure that we maximize the opportunities for small businesses. It's essentially what we're trying to do. So it's everything, but the thing that gets me going, and I could talk about all night, is practical design. And there's Todd! Yay, Todd, good timing. So practical design is a term that a handful of states have been using to describe the following. Basically, looking to not go to the maximum on all designs, but if you can get 80% of the benefit for 20% of the cost, do it. Don't go to the maximum and try and accommodate everything for the future, but try and figure out what it is that you need now and in the midterm to longish term. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Over time, I was taught, Todd was taught, when he first came into DOT, that there were unknowns, and we have the duty as engineers to make sure that we are designing to make people safe while they're driving. Right? Right? Safety,
no matter what.
No matter what, safety is number one. So when you look at a highway design, you will see large swaths of land next to the highway. Do you know why they're there? Don't answer. You're too close to this. Do you know why they're there? Those large swaths of open land next to the highway, that's in case you fall asleep, so that you can run off the road. If you are doing something you shouldn't, like texting or paying attention to a kid in the back seat, you have the room to run off the road. We were taught to over-design by 20% because there's no prototypes, there's no advanced research development when you go to put out a bridge or a sewage treatment plant or a water plant. There is no prototype. You don't get a second chance, right? You have to make sure it's right the first time. So if you think about it, this idea of over-engineering generation over generation has created quite large standards. But now we have more data. In the last 10 years, the amount of data about safety and safety research is amazing. It's amazing. And so now we can get rid of the myths about what should be over-engineered or engineered and get down to what it is we actually need and what you need to make things safe. So if you want something to perform at 45 miles an hour that's safe, maybe you shouldn't design it at 70 miles an hour and then post it at 45, which is something that all DOTs have done in the past. And maybe if the entire roadway has 6-foot shoulders and the new standards are 12-foot, but you only, and you're looking at putting in a new bridge on a 20-mile segment, maybe you shouldn't put a 12-foot shoulder on a bridge where the cost is the highest. Maybe you just keep it at 6, right? I'll give you another example. So how many of you actually go around the curves at the curb advisory speed sign suggestion? Okay, you're very ethical. I appreciate that.
Are you sure?
They're just suggestions. So now you won't after I tell you what they're based on. So when technicians have gone out into the field, they have based the speed sign on a little piece of cardboard they put on the dashboard that has a little, I should get a picture of it so I can put it on here. It has basically uncomfortable or comfortable, so that when you go around the curve, the technician is being told that's an uncomfortable speed. Well, that whole little needle that hangs down and into the area of comfortable, non-comfortable was based on a friction factor of a tire, of a Model T Ford.
That's the criteria.
So I'm just saying, technology moves on, and so should we. And we shouldn't be basing things on stuff from, I don't know, 80, 90, 100 years ago. So because we have data, because we continue to gather more data, it's how do you incorporate that into our designs so that we're not over-engineering, we're providing the outcome of relieving congestion or safety that we need to do, but we're not putting in more money than we need to, so that we can use that money to go make another intersection more safe for all users, or another part of this roadway more safe. So we can get to more people and save more lives. So that's the bottom line, I think, for all of us. And when we go out into that public right-of-way, we want to know that we feel safe. And if we can get to more communities and help them achieve that in economic development, then we're doing our job. So in terms of safety, segue, well, we can take questions after this, but there are a lot of questions. So they have AWB.
Not many questions.
A lot of questions. What I will do is just give a quick introduction, and then maybe Todd can read over these and we can answer some of them in a presentation style format. This project, I came in a year ago, just over a year ago. I know that there were some people who were like, this is the way to go, and some others that were like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm never going to vote for this. I'm never going to like it. It was controversial. I get it.
And you're
But
speaking of the,
Alaska Way Viaduct.
just for folks who hadn't read the questions.
Yeah, sorry. But there was a vote that was taken. Several votes that were taken. There was a decision by the legislature to fund. It is our duty to carry out that direction. And we are trying to do that in a way that achieves a lot of different goals. There's the goal of replacing the viaduct. There's the goal of providing for a port within a major city. And you were just talking about trying to accommodate bikes with the port in the city, right? So having a major port right there next to your downtown is a good thing and a very difficult thing, right? Because there's a lot of land use tension. How do you grow a city right next to a major port and not have tension between all of the things that are taking place there? So we're trying to achieve economic development. We're trying to make for a better waterfront to connect people, right? This is a nationwide trend. No matter how big or small your city, you want to reconnect to your waterfront because there's economic vitality just within doing that. And, as the mayor of Milwaukee in the 90s used to say, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, what is your picture postcard? What is your picture postcard of your neighborhood? What is your picture postcard of what makes you proud, right? That's why people want to reconnect, because that's where the beauty, that's where the inherent beauty lies, the aesthetics of your community. If you want to show off and you want to send a picture, right, to somebody. So we're trying to achieve all of that within one project. And we have, Todd and his folks have actually delivered hundreds of millions of dollars of project already. And Bertha is just a small part of the overall program. So I want to put that into perspective, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But this is what I want to say. The machine is not working. The machine is not owned by Washington Department of Transportation. The machine is a tool owned by the contractor to provide us, the customer, you and I, with a product. That product is a tunnel. We don't own the machine, we don't operate the machine, we don't maintain the machine. We didn't design the machine. The machine is the contractors, and they need to fix the machine. They still have the legal contract to provide us the tunnel. And while, no, not yet, no questions yet. While we have every expectation and confidence that we will be provided a tunnel in the end that is safe, much safer than the Alaskan Way Viaduct for the future with seismic activity, we don't know exactly what date we're going to be opening that tunnel now. And I think that's, part of the issue of just like events like tonight. We all want to see that completed and open so that some of this congestion and issues of accessibility and mobility that we're all feeling around downtown and in and out of downtown and through downtown can be dealt with. But what I want to let you know is that we're holding the contractor, and Todd is doing an amazing job keeping an eye on every part of what they are attempting to do. We are holding them accountable to fix their tool and get it going again, and not have that be a taxpayer expense. And because they are not meeting their timeline, hold them accountable to that as well. For every day after January 2nd, we will be deducting from any bill that they send us $50,000 a day. And for every day after November 9th, 2016, we will be deducting $100,000 a day. So they have an incentive, one, financially on this project to make sure that they get it done as fast as they possibly can, as safely as they can underneath the city of Seattle. But they also have a financial incentive because these companies are looking at internationally doing business with this type of technology, and their contracts that are just waiting to see how this project goes. So we are confident that they are going to come through because they want to be able to compete and have reputations of having completed this project and done everything that they could possibly do. So we are working very hard every day to make sure that one, we protect, and two, they deliver a product. In the meantime, there's a lot of good stuff going on and a lot of congestion that results from all of that work. And I'm going to turn it over to Todd, and then we can ask some questions about either what WSDOT is up to generically in terms of the big picture and what's going on in the project. So Todd, you want to?
We have a couple of questions we'll ask you first before we open it up.
Yeah, but I'm hoping that we can get at some of these.
So, as was mentioned by the Secretary, we're building this tunnel project and associated roadways on each end to replace that existing viaduct. And when you look at the way we view structures, that one was already on the radar screen on being aged when that Nisqually earthquake happened. But that really brought it to the forefront. So everyone knows there was a certain amount of sinkage, there was a certain amount of crackage that took place, and it really then moved it from, oh, we need to be getting to that, to we have to be getting to this. And so they went through a lot of pains to decide how to replace it, and depending whatever side you were on, elevated, surface, or tunnel, that's behind us now. The decision has been made for the tunnel.
No solar panels?
No solar panels. So what we need to do, though, is keep that viaduct operational until the tunnel is completed. And one of the reasons that the tunnel was selected was for that very reason, was to have a roadway that was moving that 100,000 vehicles a day and not being disrupted by construction. If you had replaced it with an elevated, that would have been 100,000 cars need to find someplace else to go every day during the whole life of the construction. If you would have just went with a surface street, well, that would have been 100,000 just finding a place to go somewhere. So that's still a good sound idea as long as you keep that viaduct going. So we're pretty interested in that. So with those inspections, as you know, there's twice a year where we shut it down and fully the bridge inspectors walk it, look at it. They now know the structure like the back of their hand. So they know exactly where they need to go, what they need to look at. And then in the offsetting half years, they look at it from the bottom, but they don't have to close traffic. And so I see with one of your questions here is when they did this inspection in March, those cracks that they're always constantly watching, they seen some of them open up more, and this was in the Seneca ramp area, and they seen some new cracks form. And so that is immediately kind of high alert. We need to look at something. We need to make sure what's going on, because we're never going to have that structure with vehicles on it if it's not safe to be traveling on or being underneath.
So let's just highlight that. If it's unsafe, we will shut it down.
Absolutely. And so right at that point in time, they could tell by the types of cracks and the way the cracks were, is that they could open it back up, and they would just need to come back and do a little bit more inspection in a following weekend, so which they did. And then they determined that, yeah, with the structure and everything that it does, and it wants to move, and people are kind of surprised that structures move. You all know that, right? All bridges move. If you ever are walking a road and walk on a bridge with traffic, it will kind of freak you out. Because it's like moving with every car. People are like, something's wrong. No, that's what they're meant to do. So with this movement, though, there's an expansion joint between it and the Seneca ramp. And that expansion joint stopped working. And when things don't work right, then the stresses go where you don't want them to go. And that's what caused the cracks.
Kind of
So,
like when your back freezes up.
yeah,
And suddenly your hips hurt.
it's kind of like the truss in your roof. You know, if you want, there's the stories about the snow on your roof, the snow load, and the guy goes out to shovel the snow off because he's afraid his roof is going to fall in, and he shovels one half, and then he decides he'll take a break, and that night his house falls down because he has then made that truss not operate right. Well, that was pretty much what was happening with the viaduct with this lock expansion joint. So they immediately went in the cracks that could be filled with epoxy. And this is kind of, when you think of epoxy, you think the little, where you do it at home with a little 1-minute glue, and you think, well, what good is that? Well, the epoxy that we use is actually stronger than concrete. So when we glue a joint back together, it's actually better than the concrete around it.
And most of the reason for doing that is so that water doesn't go in, right, and expand and even make it worse.
Make it worse. So some of those were already glued, epoxy back together, so it's kind of a joke, you know, we glued the bridge back together. Some of this work is going to take a little bit more extensive repair, and we need to free up that expansion joint. So that's going to take a closure of the bridge, but it's not something that like we have to do tomorrow. So we're trying to set that contract up to take place in the fall when we're already going to be doing another closure of the viaduct because of something that we're doing at the north end. So there's really like 3 things we're going to try and do on 99, all coordinated over about a 4 to 5 day period. And just like you've seen before when we did viaduct closures, since it affects so many people's lives, it will be well publicized in advance. People will be encouraged to take alternate modes. People will be encouraged maybe even stay home those couple days. You know, there'll be a big campaign so no one just wakes up and is surprised. So, and we do feel that with the inspection cycle that we have, even though this bridge is being replaced, we won't see anything on the horizon that takes this structure out of circulation before the tunnel is complete. Now, I can't predict another Nisqually earthquake. So if that was to happen, yeah, it's going to be out of service. But guess what? There's going to be probably a lot of other things that are out of service too. So with just generally what's going on with the bridge inspection cycle that we have, what we know about that structure, we do not see a problem being able to basically nurse it along. And nurse it along still means it is safe. It's safe to be under it and it's safe to be on it until we get the tunnel open. Now what happens if we do have that earthquake and the thing is just gone and it's out of the picture? Well, if it's just gone and out of the picture, then we just have to implement other plans. And those plans are in existence. They started clear back in like 2006, and they've updated them a couple times, and we update them every couple years. But essentially, it's like a very robust emergency plan. And it says if this main thoroughfare was to go away, what would we do? Well, there would be signage that would have to go up. There would have to be the routes that were actually considered more the official detours. There would have to be coordination with Metro to see if transit could help pick up that slack. It is a pretty comprehensive plan, and as the question says here, yes, everyone is involved. The county's involved, the city's involved, the state is involved. Everyone's a player in this. Knock on, I guess this isn't wood, but fake wood. That's not going to happen, but yeah, there are people that spend their time thinking about this. We don't dwell on it every day because we are also spending our time trying to make sure STP is getting that machine going. But we do make sure these plans are updated and can be followed by emergency operation centers and put in place if these worst case scenarios, catastrophes were to happen.
And is that something that is available if we wanted to look at something like that? I mean, one of the reasons that's one of the questions we wanted to ask is, we're very close to South Park, over here, a part of Seattle, where they had a major artery for their neighborhood, the South Park Bridge, closed. In that case, because everybody was fighting around funding, and funding didn't get in place before it became too unsafe to drive, and they closed it. So we do have some concerns that as issues with the tunnel tools are dragging out. What happens if things get longer and longer and not an earthquake, but just an inspection happens and they determine, hey, we need to close one of the lanes and run half as much traffic on the viaduct, or we need to do something different. What are the mitigation plans in place for that?
Is there a kind of a one-pager that we could put together of what the major steps would be?
Yeah.
Like overnight that would happen, so that there's some sort of, kind of expectation of the level that we would have to go to in order to make that.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
And if that, just for the immediate sake, there's emergency gates that come down if there's an earthquake. There are some immediate things that happen to keep people safe. And as you're describing, if it was to, and we interact so routinely with the county and the city on everything that the idea of having to move traffic and to deal with how that would happen, how transit would play a role, and what streets would become more available would happen pretty quickly. But again, I don't foresee anything as what you're describing took place on this route taking place on this structure. It is the type of thing again where it's being watched very closely, and we're pretty mindful of the times that we close it. You see we try and pick times every now and then. We have to pick a time that it can't be avoided having an impact. And I think that was another question I had heard that folks were wondering about. There will become a point in time, and there will, because this machine is going to mine again, when we're going to tunnel underneath the viaduct. And when we do that, top of the tunnel is going to be just about 15 feet within some of the underground supports that hold that thing up. So a lot of analysis is being done by the contractor. It's their responsibility to make sure they can go through this safely. As the secretary mentioned, we made sure in this contract that this machine was their responsibility because we wanted to make sure they owned that. This type of thing is also their responsibility. So their calculations and everything tell them and us that structure, they can tunnel underneath it and there won't be a problem. But some of the ways that they make sure there's not a problem is they have to be watching and monitoring exactly what's happening with the ground, exactly what's happening with the structure, and immediately be ready to do some route injection into the ground if voids were to happen. And to be able to do that quickly,
What do you mean?
just big holes, there's no ground there anymore.
Because of the way.
Because the machine has taken more material out than it was supposed to. And the best way to assure that can happen quickly is to already have traffic off the structure. So it was a painful decision. It was somewhat of a controversial decision, but we thought for the longevity, we didn't go through all this pain to accidentally knock this structure out of commission for a long period of time. By tunneling under it, it would be better to have, again, a well-publicized approximately 10-day closure of the viaduct while STP tunnels underneath it. So when it's too soon now with their schedule and mining rates to be able to predict when that's going to happen, but we are definitely targeting at least like a 2-month advance notice of when that's going to happen. And it will be like some of these other 1-week closures we've had. It will be well publicized. There will be increased routes by Metro. People will be encouraged to do all these other things. So that will happen, but it is off in the distance and it will be well planned out. And really, because we do those types of things, that's why we kind of have already in our hands the immediate plans that would work if there was something where we had to shut it down. Because we would just basically implement that same type of thing. It would just be done more in a crisis fashion than where we take 2 months to communicate that.
We do want to talk quickly about a couple other project areas before we have a little bit of time for some Q&A from our attendees at the meeting tonight. Are you able to talk, Lynn, about beyond the viaduct and the tunnel project, any projects that might address access to the West Seattle area here, such as any plans for State Route 509 or other plans happening with the ferries?
Well, 167-509 was one of the major projects on the, what we call the unfunded project list, and it's still unfunded. The only, we have tentative ideas around that project, but we don't have development funds right now, and I'm keeping an eye out to figure out if there are opportunities to at least advance some of the development work. But we, right now, as I had mentioned, things are very tight. The one thing I did not mention is the Supreme Court decision. I think it was my 7th or 8th week. That first 2 months was amazingly rough. Skagit went down. There's litigation against WSDOT for culverts in the Puget Sound region, basically on their impact to salmon habitat. And the Supreme Court decision the state Supreme Court decision was that WSDOT needed to replace 817 culverts in the next 17 years at a cost we estimate at just under $3 billion. So it's a mega project, and somewhat like the McCleary. It's the McCleary of transportation. So we're looking at how we can make a good faith effort to at least start moving on those culverts and do as much habitat restoration as we possibly can under existing funding. But that's $320 million plus or minus a biennium in order to move that project, and that is about our capital program right now. So we're asking for the ability to move some of those funds to culverts, but not obviously all of them, because our preservation of the existing system, in other words, replacing concrete, is not just maintenance, it's a major capital project. And so we're trying to do that, as well as preservation projects like painting the bridges is another big area. If we don't paint the steel bridges, they deteriorate faster. We are then put in the mode of having them be structurally deficient, and then going to the hard task of load limiting them. And with steel bridges all across the state, if we end up with another 71, which is what we estimate becoming structurally deficient, we could end up with cities not having good freight access and therefore limiting their economic activities. So we don't want to be in that position, but when you look at just one bridge called Ship Canal that needs to be painted, it's $38 million. Which pretty much takes up the budget for several years for painting. Yeah, you're all writing that down. It's a big number. When we talk about maintenance and preservation, these are not low-cost items. Maintaining what we have, they're massive investments that we need to protect. So, did I answer the question?
Yes. So really quick, we just had 2 other questions, and then I want to make sure we at least get a few minutes for folks to talk to you.
And Mark just asked the first question.
So our last 2 questions are about ferries. I don't know if you were able to look into this at all before you came.
Yeah.
We have a real concern here in West Seattle because we do have a ferry terminal here, the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal, where ferries come from Southworth and Vashon. And a lot of folks have been concerned for a while that, especially with the bigger ferries coming online, that a lot of cars come off those ferries at one end of our peninsula here, and they drive across to go onto the West Seattle Bridge and get into all that traffic there around the Viaduct and the approach to I-5. And when accidents happen, that's sort of a regular disembarkation of 35, 40 vehicles coming across and adding into that traffic if it's not moving. And so I'll just sort of compact these. Do you know if WSDOT has looked at all at as we start to plan for the Coleman Ferry Dock expansion or remodel, or future plans for the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock? are there any possibilities to move some or all of those ferry runs? People suggested, would there be a way to run more passenger ferries into downtown or divert sort of peak hour ferries directly into downtown Seattle to help spread out that traffic a little bit?
Not that I'm aware of, and no, I didn't have time to look into all the studies, I'm sorry. But I think for planning purposes moving forward, it's certainly something to consider. Just looking at what I'm always interested in is what redundancy do we have in the system. So if there's a way to minimize the impacts, that's great. But if it's going to be cost prohibitive, then we need to look at something that's more practical. I mean, so I would say right now, no, it's not on the forefront. Getting the ferry boats painted would
Cost
be
millions of dollars.
Right. And I think, what was the estimate? I know that the one that was on Crust, that somebody had an article up there about why is there peeling paint, and that I can't remember which ferry vessel it was, but it's going to supposedly needs to be in dry dock to do an entire repaint. I think at $15 million, because it's not just slapping paint on, right? You have to take it down. So
That's what a lot of it costs us, is getting rid of the old lead paint.
Yeah.
You take it, it's containment on these bridges,
Yeah.
it's complete containment.
right. It's intense. So I'll just say we can talk more about that in the future, especially with the new ferry director.
Okay. We'd love to follow up.
But I think the King County Water Tech has kind of a coordinated conversation, right? I know that when we talk about growth in the ferries, the only place we have ability to grow is passengers. So the question then would be, if we're going to promote that, how do we promote passenger use? And then how do we make sure the transit connections are working? So.
All right. We've got for those who arrived late, unfortunately, Ms. Peterson has to leave about 7:30, so we've got about 10, maybe 15 minutes if you can hang out a little bit longer for Q&A from people.
Mark.
Marty's got the first question, and then I'll try to call people
You
in
need to
order.
put Marty on there if that's what he gets.
Actually, well, it depends on, as we get to know each other better.
I'm not going to call you Marty. You can call me secretary.
So I don't have to put the mat in the front. In the emergency plan, have you coordinated with the United States Coast Guard in terms of Long-Beach waterway movement and with Burlington Northern, so that they coordinate trains rather than setting them up to block rush hour and back up traffic for who knows how long?
I don't have the answer to that.
We'll have to look into
Yeah,
that.
I'll have to look into that.
Would you be willing to,
Yeah.
because what we're finding is that there are two godlike structures that seem to be unassailable, Burlington Northern and the U.S. Coast Guards. And we would like, in a disaster or in a situation of that sort, to know that our mobility is not going to be hampered by folks that say that their traffic
It's more important.
has more,
Yeah.
has more priority than, say,
Right.
emergency vehicles trying to get through.
Right. Good question. We'll follow up.
It was worth the wait.
Amanda?
Hi.
I'm sorry, you're moderating.
Oh, sorry, Amanda first, and then we'll go next.
I have a question about signage. I know that you had talked a little bit about the signs being really helpful that have been installed on I-5. I grew up in Illinois. I grew up in the south of Chicago. And
Can't hear that at all.
No, I bet you can't. And on all of the freeways there are signs. If you're in an accident, if you need emergency assistance, dial this number, and then the IDOT tow truck comes and gets you.
Right.
And there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect or an unsureness of who is supposed to be handling emergencies when they happen. So right now, it's the Seattle Police Department comes out and then they call a tow truck, and then some tow truck company that's been contracted comes out and picks up the
Did
vehicle.
this happen to you? Or
Yes.
Okay.
This has happened in December when it completely shut down the city, essentially. Shut down Seattle, shut down.
And where was the
whole
area
area.
you know what you're talking about?
There was one car and a single car accident, no injuries, on 99.
Oh, I got it.
North on
Okay.
99.
I was
Right,
wondering
right on
what
the
this
loop,
would be.
we're right on the curve where it's starting to come up onto the upper deck, right in front of the Isilon.
One car,
No injuries.
Right.
Couldn't.
how many hours?
Several. And so,
She counted.
and that, it was a really frustrating
Yeah.
year for everybody in
Yeah.
Seattle. Everyone downtown too, I mean, it affected
Yeah.
the entire region. So it might have been helpful if in that situation, there's a plan that says, call this number and then a watchdog tow truck comes and takes you away, kind of like they do in Illinois.
So we've done a lot of coordination with our IRT, which stands for
Instant response.
Instant Response Teams.
Right.
On I-5 specifically. And they know exactly, right? I mean, there's a total protocol
different.
there, right? And so 99 would be a different protocol because we don't really have the IRTs running up and down them, but we can check into that.
And you're not going to believe this, you're not going to want to hear it, but we did a little bit of this on Snoqualmie Pass as well,
Oh, did
one
you?
of my past lives. When DOT attempts to take control over towing, there's a big outcry from the towing lobbyists.
Okay.
And so
we don't
there's only very few places where we do that. So we do it on some of the few floating bridges, and we do it on Snoqualmie Pass every now and then. But it is, at this point, DOT has not been able to move in a direction to get past basically the lobbyists that support
But-
that private entity.
But what we can do is look into the protocols
Yes.
and make sure that, that maybe, if it's the city that's supposed to be taking those calls, right, and then delivering information to the different and coordinating that somehow we can work with them on either signage or a small campaign.
Because that is one of the things that they say in exchange. They say, no, we will be right there with the tow truck. So if that's, not happening.
Maybe they're-
then-
I think the freedoms of the other people in the city should trump any kind of political agenda that the tow truck
Yeah.
is right now.
The question really is the outcome, right? And the outcome is that you want some sort of tow truck there to remove the obstacle as quickly as possible, because the longer it's there, the bigger the backup, and the bigger it is to dissipate that wave. So I guess what I would say is let's focus on the outcome and think about, if it's the city's responsibility because it's within the city limits, how do they coordinate that information and work with so that we can remove that as
I
fast
feel
as
like they
possible.
deferred to you.
They defer
That's
to
what I
you,
recall.
which is why we
Well,
brought
which
this.
is why we'll call them and talk to them about what are the protocols and do we need to strengthen them.
And like one suggestion that was brought up then, I think the tow truck was brought from the rear through all the traffic.
And when we
And
followed
is
up
there
with-
a protocol that could be put in place that the police stop traffic and bring it from the front,
That was-
which would be a lot
That was
faster?
what we asked SDOT and SPD. I mean, I grew up, in Connecticut. If you see the New York accidents, it doesn't matter where it is. NYPD is going to say stop, and they're going to shut down the whole highway for a few minutes, back up a tow truck, slap the car on there, shove everybody off the highway as fast as possible. It could be done, and we're off and running again.
Okay.
All right, next question.
Basically, SPD said they don't want to do that.
Well, I was relieved to hear that you're keeping the viaduct safe. However, in February of 2007, then Governor Trepanier said it was extremely dangerous, and I've given a person here talk. 2011 said it's got to come down in 2012. We can no longer bandage it over. We can no longer do the wonderful things that you described that we're doing. So that's a contradiction. Do you feel that she overstated that?
It's not a contradiction. It still needs to come down because it will not survive a large earthquake. However, that doesn't mean that we can't make it last through the completion of this project and have it be safe in terms of everyday use.
She said the patching would have to be finished, stopped, and that wasn't going to
a point which you cannot patch, but we're not at that point yet. And if we were at that point, we'd shut it down.
I can't speak to what she would have said back then or the context in which she said it, because it was somewhere else at that point in time.
But I don't think, there's a difference, I mean, there's just a general difference between not having the option for the future be right there, right? And being able to keep this, the Alaskan Viaduct safe through the completion of the project and another earthquake. We need to get it down before we have another earthquake. So as quickly as we can, as safely as we can, we're trying to get that other option open.
Thank you. Other questions?
I just want to add to the tow truck issue. I drive the Viaduct. I'm from Dickinson Street, I live in Patton. I take the Fremont Viaduct every day. It's not just small tow trucks we need, because Waste Management uses the Viaduct every morning with 15 garbage trucks. And prior to this accident we spoke to earlier, the garbage truck is in the same location stuck. Call the city, oh yeah, we're going to get a tow truck there. Well, they need a heavy-duty tow truck to do that, so we need intercoordination. We've got to have something ready. It took 5 hours to fix that mess.
Thanks.
2 thoughts. One, I've just spent 3 weeks in Australia where they have roundabouts, and they're seeming to do a whole lot well, but there's a lot of intersections too that are signal controlled. But roundabouts are always moving. A triple lane roundabout is a scary thing.
We haven't broached that topic
and then
in the
you're
US.
driving on the wrong side of the road, which just adds to it.
Yeah, right.
However, I just wanted to throw this out, going back to our viaduct and State Route 99, and I feel that WSDOT over the years as I commuted between West Seattle and Federal Way, WSDOT has done an excellent job of there'd be an accident no one would show up to. Over the years I saw that there was the vans there and the signage, and it seemed WSDOT was responding to accidents and being very proactive. Given that you guys have that down, in my opinion, can you take over State Route 99 through the end of the project and say to the city, we will take care of clearing the accidents and get the city out?
We're going to have to look at what the protocols are right now.
I understand, and they may not be that.
And I don't know what they are right now.
But would you be willing?
Well, we're going to look into it.
Okay.
But right now, in order to achieve that, I can't make a promise because of the cost of, the amount of money that we have left over right now and where we are with this project, it's tight, right? So we'll just look to see what the protocols are right now, if they can be strengthened, and then we'll see if that deals with the outcome, rather than make a specific commitment to something that may not be necessary.
It feels, and I appreciate your honesty about that, it does feel though that it adds to the safety component that you have advocated so strongly for. And it's obviously, to us, it's a direct relation to the construction project that you are managing. So we'll look forward to seeing what the outcome of that is.
Thank you.
We have one more question for Lynn specifically before she has to go.
Okay, this is kind of a technical deal, but concerning Bertha. We're assuming that there was a design flaw that caused the seals to fail and caused a bearing fail. Is the state monitoring what the processes are to solve that design flaw? So
Yes.
you don't get halfway through again and you can't dig a hole to get it out?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a sticky thing, because yes, we are, because we have that same concern, and so we want to make sure that isn't going to happen. But as we mentioned, we specifically made sure on this contract that they owned that machine, and they owned any decisions about that machine. So they're not on record as saying there's a design flaw.
No, I've noticed that. They're very careful about saying that.
Yeah. So as they continue to move forward with this repair, which at this point, what they've communicated is they need to replace the seal system with a different, more robust seal system design. And they're going to replace the main bearing, not because it's damaged, but because there's some contaminants in the fluids in it. Then when they get to restart this machine, we will be asking a lot of questions, and we will be asking them to submit a bunch of different things to us to make us feel comfortable that this machine is good for the journey. Now, just as another little FYI, this work that they're doing by coming in from the surface, they could do from within the machine, but again, this is their nickel, so they get to decide how to do it. They felt like they could do it faster for schedule reasons by accessing it from the surface. Again, schedule costs them, so that's a decision that they make to sink that type of cost in to fix it faster. But if it was under Seattle, as you mentioned, they could still do this type of work, and it still would be their cost responsibility.
Okay. So I'll ask Todd if he can hang out a few more minutes, if there are a couple more viaduct-related questions. And we do want to respect Lynn and let her get to take care of your husband. So let's give her a big thank you.
Good luck with that.
Lots of hand sanitizer.
Yeah, wash your hands.
Just saying.
Yes. I know. So thank you all, and I appreciate your input, and we'll keep talking, and we'll follow up on some of these things. Thank you.
Do we have a couple more questions about the viaduct project or tunnel for Bertha stuff for Todd?
Yes, Marty. Thank you. Crazy possibility outside the realm of any kind of, what if Bertha is dead and the tunnel stops where it is? Are you developing any contingency plan for turning it into an underground parking lot, or?
No.
I'm joking about that, but
No,
what contingency plan is?
I think that's a sound question that we would be thinking about if we didn't have such strong belief that even though we're disappointed where Seattle Tunnel Partners is on this project, and we're skeptical about some of their schedule dates they've given us for restart, we are still confident in this machine and the whole concept of building this tunnel. So it would be premature to go that route to believe that the tunnel has to be abandoned. We don't believe that at all. We do believe, as the Secretary mentioned, these two firms that make up Seattle Tunnel Partners have a lot on the line, both in immediate investment in this project itself and in their corporate names and where they stand in the industry throughout the world. They're very committed to making this tunnel work. And we're still strongly on the side of believing that they can do that. So no, we're not going down the path yet of deciding what to do with the 1,000 feet of completed tunnel.
I was just thinking, Churchill's funeral plans were called
Oh, yeah.
Operation Hope Not. And I was wondering if you had an Operation
We're getting every joke that you can imagine. You know, we have some of our media friends on the radio that like to help us out with that as well. We're short of ideas.
Anyone who hasn't
Just
asked
real
a
quick,
question yet?
not controversial, just, you hear the term $80 million drill bit or Big Bertha, and she alludes that we don't really own it. So I don't know why the media makes a point of saying how expensive it is. Is it good? Are we like renting it? I mean, this is a junior high question, but are we renting it?
It's a good question. So basically, this is like a fixed price contract. So we said, hey, we want you to give us this project. And that's different than a lot of our jobs. A lot of our jobs are design, bid, build, where we actually break it right down to the tons of asphalt, the yards of gravel, the lineal feet of sealant. I mean, everything is broken down into pieces, and then that's paid by the quantity. And that's tracked as they go through the project. This one isn't like that. It's just like, give us this completed project, what's the price tag? So they give us this big price tag. Let's just say it's $1 billion. Well, then we have to figure out a way to pay them that $1 billion, because we're not going to pay it for them up front, but we can't expect them to wait to the end of the project. So they have to submit to us how that money's kind of being spent. And so within that, we learned things, and we learned that basically the on-the-lot price tag, you know, we jokingly go, that's the car I want, it's on the lot, but it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. The on-the-lot price for that machine was $80 million. It cost them probably another 8 or 10 to get, you know, the CD changer and everything that they wanted in it. The bells and whistles. So that's where that number comes from. That's what they paid for the machine. They bought it from Hitachi Zosen, who built it just for this project. Again, I think you've already heard this, you're sick of it. Largest one ever done, prototype, you know, state of the art.
And then they'll reuse it.
It is theirs, and so they can decide what they want to do with it at the end. It is, sometimes these things tunnel so many miles, they're completely wore out. This journey will not wear this one out, so they'll decide what they want to do with it. They might be so sick of it, they might just sell it for scrap at that time. I don't know, but it's that, you know, they figured that into their bid because they know it's just be kind of like, you know, if let's say you needed a dump truck just to rebuild your 1 acre that you have, and you thought, well, I might as well buy it, use it for the 2 years it's going to take me to do that, and sell it. You're thinking of that selling price. So when they put their overall bid in, someone in their great management budget decided what they were going to spend and what they thought they would get for it, and then that goes in their overall price thinking.
Did you say Berkeley cost $80 million?
Yes.
I have one question, just because everyone else has anymore, because it just keeps popping up in different points and different media stories and online debates, and people probably wonder this. If Berkeley got stuck under this building or under the viaduct or some, 70-story high-rise downtown, how does it get rescued? I mean, the stories you hear sometimes that you practically have to demo a building or the market to get it back out. What would happen?
So again, in this case, getting stuck again is a term that some people have used. This machine is not stuck. This machine can move right now. Matter of fact, they move it around every now and then just to make sure it doesn't become stuck. So it's like, why is it not mining? So if it's not mining, because in this case the seal system is compromised, you can't just start taking the machine apart from the back through the tunnel that's completed, bring in the pieces through that tunnel that's completed, and rebuild the seal system. Now, funny enough, if you do research on these machines, you'll find that failing seal systems is kind of something that happens with these machines. Sometimes, if they're close to the end, and all their mechanisms, all their indicators say, oh, the seal systems are blowing, they just like say, heck with it, and they just pour the grease to it. And they just take it the rest of the way, because they know it's more important to finish the tunnel, and they don't want to try and fix the seals. Really, they're going to salvage the machine some other way. They just grease it and go. So there's everything you see like this, where they're putting in a completely different seal system design, more robust is what they're calling it, versus you just pump grease in it and just finish the drive.
So and maybe everyone in this room already understands this, but can you just walk us through what kind of mitigation once the elements need to viaduct, like the bus routes or whatever, and how long it's lasting, and
I do not know those specifics. I know that there's just a set amount of dollars. It was roughly $30 million that was a part of the budget of this project that went to Metro for them to supply mitigation for the impacts to the highways during the construction. How they have taken that money over the years and how they put it into their system to buy buses and to put routes into play is very complex, and that's, you have to have Metro answer. Exactly.
So there was some money that was put in. I wish we had Chris Archins here tonight to give the exact amount. But there was money that was put in at the front of the project, which is funding extra runs of buses across the bridge. So extra runs on the C line, extra runs on the 120, things like that. And we're moving, I believe it's 30,000 more people across the bridge on the buses than we were before the project.
Metro did some sort of study with WSDOT to figure out what would be the increased delay time, from all the construction. It was something like 18 minutes per way. So Metro and WSDOT poured in, the first batch of mitigation was something like $25 million for 2 years. and West Seattle gets about 95 or 94.5% of that, and the rest goes up by Aurora and Ballard. And basically, it's spread out across the length of the new batch mitigation for the next 2 years. It's like
so
30,
what you might have heard for a bit of talk a few months back that when that money was put, it unfortunately wasn't funded enough for the end of the project. And so back in January, February, there was a really big push. We actually had folks out from the state back at that time, and we got more money now to continue funding it. But again, yes, it's based on where we think the project is going to end. At the moment, the mitigation will run out again before we expect this project to be completed.
So maybe
and we're not worried. We trust you guys, but there is going to be a need. There will be a need to push again, possibly at some point, to try and find money in WSDOT's tight budgets in order to continue funding that mitigation, because it won't go in the end.
You know, the water tax is tied to that at all?
Separate. That's completely separate. So the water tax, you just got whatever its standards are. So I guess maybe last one.
Yeah, we probably should. If someone has one more question.
So best case scenario, if they start the boring machine back up on schedule, when would the viaduct be coming down ballpark, and when would we be driving through the tunnel from here?
So you would be driving through the tunnel November 9th of 2016. And then the viaduct would be coming down probably within the next 18 months after that.
So it's not this egg, that chicken, it's this chicken, that egg.
Yeah, you want to get all the traffic, in the tunnel, and then let the contract to take down the viaduct, and then clean it all up, and then there's the rebuild of Alaskan Way.
And so temporarily will both be running, or will
Not
be shut down?
Not at all, because there will be a pretty quick shut, kind of a switch over at the ends that will then take it out of use. And then it will just be the matter of how long it takes us to have that contract timed, and then get the contractor to actually knock it down and carry it.
Has the funds been set aside for that?
Yeah, the funds for that are all part of the overall project budget that is secured.
So it's gonna happen.
It's not on the unfunded project list.
Yeah, okay, good. So it's gonna happen, it's not gonna be just
One real quick question to speaking of that, how involved are you in the rebuilding of that whole Alaska Way? So people who aren't going to take the tunnel, which is a majority probably of people here in West Seattle, how they're going to be coming into downtown. Are you involved in that as much, or is that still being developed?
We're mostly involved in it up to Coleman Dock, because that's still really a state route.
Okay.
And then we're just involved from that point to the north on, it's our obligation, because we're kind of destroying the whole thing, to give money towards that project. So we'll have some conversation, dialogue with the city, and there'll be some money that comes out of this program to go towards that. They plan on, as I'm sure you're aware, to do something much larger in nature that builds into this whole idea of them recapturing that waterfront in their long-term vision for changing the city's appearance and look.
Thank you.
So there was one more hand down here, so let's take that as the last question.
You were talking about the destruction of the viaduct, and I wondered if there was any thought or any conversation about saving like the Seneca Street on-ramp and then a chunk of the viaduct to be used as a public space. Because for many of us, the postcard that Peterson talked about is the view of the waterfront, the mountains, the ferries we got from the viaduct when we drove along.
Right.
And that is going to be taken away from us totally.
Understood. So the city is looking at some of that. I've seen some ideas that they're toying with. It does keep that Seneca ramp. I don't know if it really keeps a section of the viaduct, but they're very mindful of this new thing that they're creating, that it has some of those high viewpoint areas as well as a very desirable place down there. So a good conversation with the city could probably give you some more specifics on that, but I know they are looking into doing some things like you described.
Who to talk to
so much.
Thank you.